Hello, everyone. My name is Reggie Barnes. I'm the Director of Patient Partnership for the Autoimmune Registry, and I would like to introduce everyone to our February webinar. And we have the great benefit of having Jenifer Waldrop, the Executive Director of the Rare Disease Diversity Coalition, who's been a champion for people with rare diseases, zebras, and which I'm a member of. And she has a wide history of impacting this community, as well as her experience in other endeavors. So with that, turn it over to Jenifer. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Reggie. Hi, everybody. Great to see you today. I hope you're doing well. I'm Jenifer Waldrop, as Reggie said. I'm going to go to the next slide. I'll share a little bit about the Rare Disease Diversity Coalition, but I just wanted to thank you for the Autoimmune Registry for this opportunity, because February is not just Heart Month that people recognize, but also Rare Disease Awareness Day happens at the end of the month. And as you know, with some of these awareness days, they often happen throughout the month. So I'm so honored to have the month of February to be a part of your webinar, and that you're bringing the rare disease topic to your audience here. So thank you. We're going to go to the next slide. So a little bit about the background. As you saw in the opening there, you have this logo with Rare Disease Diversity Coalition, and then you have this other organization called the Black Women's Health Imperative. Now, what is the connection points there? Well, the Black Women's Health Imperative is a 41-year-old organization that started in the Washington, D.C. area, focused obviously on Black women and their health. So if you think about where the world was 41 years ago, we were talking about and the concerns and differences that were happening for Black women. So things around their own reproductive areas was really important in that space for Black women. And then as we moved into, so 40 plus years ago brings you into like the 70s or so, but then into the 80s, you have the HIV concerns and how people in the HIV space were actually being treated. And so there was a difference for Black women. So as part of our portfolio, we also have stuff that caters and helps the Black women in the HIV space. And then as we move forward into data and to more information that we understand and the differences of Black women and other populations, diabetes is also another part of that as well. So in the diabetes portfolio, we also serve in that area as well for diabetes. But then about 6-7 years ago, the president of Black Women's Health Imperative looked around and said, there's not any other organization out there that isn't just only focused on rare diseases as an umbrella, but hyper-focused on the diversity and the differences and the disparities that happen with these historically underrepresented populations. So perhaps a Black Women's Health Imperative would like to help out in that space. So essentially from this idea, being the epidemiologist that the Black Women's Health Imperative president is, she looked around and she talked to others and decided, hey, we should probably set up a coalition, because there's some great organizations already out there that's doing work in the rare disease space, but then no one is really hyper-focused in the marginalized populations. So here we are, almost 5 years later, that we've stood up the coalition. And I'm the second executive director in this role. The first one was working with the Black Women's Health Imperative in policy work and doing this work. And then she has since left, and the policy work falls under a different team that's focused on more of the Black women's general area, whereas the Rare Disease Diversity Coalition, we do have a policy component to it, but we're hyper-focused on the rare disease space. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an idea as to why there's a Black Women's Health Imperative is up here on the slide, along with the Rare Disease Diversity Coalition. And as you can read here, we have obviously a vision like most organizations do, and we have a very lofty goal, of course, is to obviously narrow the diagnosis time, get better treatments and better support in this space. So I'm not going to necessarily read this slide, but it is here. I'm sure you're reading it as I'm talking. So we're going to go to the next slide. So what I wanted to share with you today is a little bit of some new information. Now that you know a little bit about who the RDDC is and how we really are trying to help with the gaps in our society in rare diseases. We're also here to provide not just acknowledging the gaps that are happening, but providing some scientific information out there. So if you Google things like rare diseases and diversity, hopefully you'll see the Rare Disease Diversity Coalition pop up, but historically there hasn't been a lot of information out there. So a few years ago, we decided to look at the state of the rare diseases community and some of the concerns of diverse voices, historically underrepresented, marginalized populations. And there's not a whole lot of information out there. So one of our partners, so we're a coalition member organization. And so one of our partners is the National Organization for Rare Disorders. You might know them as NORD, and you might know them as the organization that actually helped with the Orphan Drug Act, actually, ironically, 41 years ago. So both Black Women's Health Imperative and NORD have been around for 41 years. That just is just like I had no idea that was going to happen. And it just happens that way. Nothing planned. And so we worked with NORD because they are a fairly large organization. And we said, you know, do you all being around for 41 years, think that this would be valuable to this community, that we actually intentionally get the representation from these medically underrepresented populations? And they said, yes, absolutely. And we can help you partner on this project. And so we did. So in 2023, in the summer of 2023, we went out and did the survey. And then it took us obviously a little while for us to gather that information, collect the data, analyze it, and then share the information publicly in August of 2024. So just wanted to share that with you, a little bit of the background. Next slide, please. Some folks often ask us, you know, like, what was the objective of the survey? Like, what was the purpose of that? And as you can see here, our objective was to really understand and hear from the voices of these historically marginalized populations. And so we wanted to be sure that the questions that we were asking were relevant to all populations. We looked at it through the lens of some sort of cultural humility and cultural differences. We made sure that the objectives were being met because we're looking for gaps and barriers. And we wanted to hear directly from patients and, as you know, caregivers, because 50% of rare disease patients are often children. So it's important for us to hear from caregivers. And so this was kind of the objectives of the survey itself. I'm going to go to the next slide. So, you know, some folks ask us, hey, how did you get the information that you did? Where did you hit the questions? Because we're talking about the US healthcare system, because we're about barriers and access, we really just had to focus on the United States, including Puerto Rico, and we did it both in English and Spanish. The RDDC is made up of working groups, and so one of the working groups helped us with disseminating this information, coming up with the questions. And we have quite a few of our coalition members that are ethnic based. We also obviously took advantage of traditional marketing materials like postcards. And then, of course, in today's world, we had to participate in the social media and paid Google ads. So as you can see here, we reached quite a bit of the United States. We did hit Puerto Rico. I failed to put a little I guess, megaphone on there, but I guess we did not hit Alaska and Hawaii as an example. So if you can identify with one of these states, and you may have seen this, this is kind of the results of where we were able to get the information out there. Next slide, please. So, you know, how did we do? We had original targets for about 2,000 folks to actually respond to us. And when we were looking at the data, we said we have to actually keep it open a little bit longer so that we can get more from the historically underrepresented populations. And the results of doing all of that marketing came to over 2,800 respondents. As you can see here, most of the folks that responded are individuals living with rare diseases, but we were able to get a good population within the caregiver community as well. Next slide, please. So what does it look like for the historically underrepresented populations? So we're drilling down now. And as we talk about diversity, we look at it through the lens of not just race and ethnicity, but also through the lens of gender identity, poverty line, so household income, and so that impacts the economic status, and also looking at the rural population, because as you all know, access in cities and closer to universities, for example, is more of the majority of folks, whereas some of the minority and the smaller populations are going to be your rural residents. So that's more or less how we define the broader definition of diversity. And as you can see here, when we did the data review, about 48% were from the historically underrepresented populations. So we were trying to hit over 50, but we decided that I think 48 was pretty good. And it is a groundbreaking type of data set, because as NORD has been around for a really long time and other organizations have been around for a while, longer than we have, we felt pretty confident in our data set at this point. So 48% is what we have in terms of respondents from the historically marginalized populations. Next group, please. As I mentioned, if you're not familiar with the definition of BIPOC, it stands for Black, Indigenous, or person of color, for example. And then hopefully the rest of those categories is pretty self-explanatory. Next slide. So I wanted to share a little bit about when we collected the data. Obviously, we're collecting qualitative as well as quantitative data. And so we did have some open fields in there for folks to share a little bit about, their experiences, any information that they wanted to share with us. Perhaps they went deeper in some of our questions. And I took a look at some of the information and the open comments, and I pulled out some of these areas. And I also used the Autoimmune Registry's website to help me really make sure that I was targeting what would be considered an autoimmune disease. So as you can see here, as you read these little quotes in here, there are folks that maybe you identify with personally or within your organization that have sarcoidosis, that have Addison's, that have moyamoya, that have amyloidosis, those kinds of things. So just wanted to share that. What is the relevancy here from what the data that we've collected, bringing it towards your community? So I wanted to share that we did have, this is just a sample too. There's also a bunch of others, and there's so many that I saw on your website regarding the registry and different diseases. So hopefully this is helpful a little bit as to how your community identifies with this data set. Next slide, please. So how about the results? So, we were able to get these individuals from the underserved populations because of the network that we have. And now we're looking at the information, because I think that's what a lot of people like to see, like what are the actual results? If you can see here where it says it's bolded. The first one, you are overwhelmed from managing life, caregiving responsibilities. And then the bottom two are also bolded as an example. The reason why those three are specifically bolded is because there is a delta. There is a difference between the historically represented populations and the historically underrepresented populations. So so you can see here, and I'm going to get into a little bit on the next slide a little bit more about what that delta looks like. But you may not be surprised about this response from this community. But again, no one else has talked to this rare disease community, as opposed to perhaps during COVID. We learned a lot about this, right, from the historically underrepresented marginalized populations, that they had food insecurity during COVID. They couldn't get to perhaps certain jobs that were requiring them to be at their job in person. Perhaps their buses were not running, or other public transportations. So we saw some of that data during the COVID period. So that's infectious diseases. And now you're looking at it through the lens of rare diseases. Next slide, please. So here's another example that we heard from the patients when they were providing some more information. The question was, are there other challenges or barriers that you face within the healthcare system? Again, we're talking about the U.S. healthcare system that you would like to share. And remember that we're trying to be sure that we are capturing these voices of the historically underrepresented populations. So one that stands out in that group is somebody says that they have not found Hispanic people within my condition. Other people are saying that their doctors are culturally incompetent. People are saying that, just being able to afford the cost to live with my disease and all of my medical bills, and I still have to worry about the bills I have to pay for and to put food on the table for my family. So that mirrors, right, what we just saw in the slide beforehand. We call out the rural area where healthcare choices and specialists are limited. I think many of you all know that on this, but obviously it's the patients that's saying this to us, that it's not good at all. So we're hearing directly from patients, and it's not just generalizations from others. You can go to the next slide, please. So as a result, here's another data set that came out. And if you want this actually whole report, I should put it this way. We've only taken the first blush at doing this report. There's lots of data that we can still analyze on there. This report is available on our website if you want to do a deeper dive of this information. So that's why this is called Table 11, because I literally lifted up from that report to put it into this deck here. So the survey results, as I mentioned, 50% of rare disease patients are often children. And as you saw earlier, 22% of our respondents were caregivers, which is a pretty significant amount. If anybody wants to do the quick math of 2,800 and 22% of that, this is how many people responded as caregivers. So you can see here on this table, the percent of caregivers that either agree or strongly agree with these statements that are listed here on the left-hand side. The arrows that are pointing, because don't forget, my area is really advocating for the historically marginalized and underrepresented populations. So the arrows that are pointing on the left-hand side is that there is a significant difference between the underrepresented populations, as you can see in the columns there, and the represented populations, as you can see in the last column here. So we can go for an example is the first arrow. Since I have a caregiver, my financial situation has decreased. So within the respondents category of underrepresented populations, 69% of that population feels like that is true for them. But 56% within the historically represented groups actually felt like it's true for them. So there's a much lower group that feels like their financial situation has decreased from the historically represented populations. So you can apply that same concept at the next one, which is my health is affected by the care situation. So we're seeing that these underrepresented populations as caregivers, their health is being impacted as they are now a caregiver, more so than the historically represented populations. And so I think that is super important to know, because as you all are thinking, planning, helping all communities, be sure to understand that sometimes the programs, the information that we're sharing doesn't land with all communities. And so these underrepresented populations is providing you that voice as to why they feel like there's a difference here. The third one, I'm just going to call it out, is that care takes a lot of my own strength. And that's, probably a physical strength is what we're asking about. And then the last one is for the arrow is I'm worried about my future because of the care I give. So if you think about, how can you solve and help in this space? Again, this is public data. Please feel free to use this. This can help with your business case. This can help with your programs. And hopefully it is helpful to you. Next slide, please. Again, survey caregiver highlights. So I shared a little bit about, the deltas between the historically represented and underrepresented populations. If you're curious as to, based on the demographics, what does that mean? I have to say, when you look at if you look at the report, and there's our website at the bottom there as an example, when you look at this report, time and time again, the LGBTQ community, unfortunately, was always the highest in many of these categories. So if you look at the first graph on here, again, a caregiver highlight, you are overwhelmed from managing life caregiving responsibilities. The LGBTQ community that, again, they self-selected, they volunteered this information. They said that within that category, within that group, over 70% of those folks feel this way. Now, the historically represented populations, look at the difference between the first line up there, the bar, not underserved, which is about 40%, and the LGBTQ community, which is over 70%. So there is a big delta there. Same thing on the right-hand side with this graph. You were feeling stressed, anxious, drained, or hopeless as a caregiver. Again, the marginalized populations, all of them are above the historically represented populations. So there's something that is definitely different. Things in our society are being handled differently. Things are being received differently by these underserved populations. So I just want you to dial in a little bit on that. And as you think through about how you are communicating and working through your programs and creating some new opportunities, please use this data to help in that space. Next slide, please. So the diagnostic journey, is long oftentimes for rare disease patients. And in fact, there is a handful of rare disease patients, more than a handful, that are actually undiagnosed, unfortunately. Many of you may already know this, being in the autoimmune space, but I wanted to share this anyway, because, most, as we've said, most rare diseases are genetic based. But so many people actually are not asked for genetic testing. So we did ask them this question, obviously, in our survey, and we assumed that it was not happening, but here's the data that shows it really is not happening. And more so, they're actually not being offered genetic testing or to meet with genetic counselors as well. So if you're in the genetic space, or if you're thinking about new solutions, or you've got new partners, perhaps you can also use this data set to help out. Because when I look at what I showed earlier with sarcoidosis, amyloidosis, all the doses, it sounds like, there's a lot of opportunities there, I think, for the genetic testing component to it. So just wanted to cross-apply some of those findings here for you all. Next slide, please. So more findings. So like I mentioned, we were talking about it this is all through the lens of the rare disease community and through the lens of the United States. Well, when you look at this findings here, you can see that we talked about it through the health insurance. And some of you may think, well, looking at this population, perhaps many of these folks are on Medicare and Medicaid. Well, the people that we were able to reach, actually, 49% have private insurance, 35% are on Medicare, and 16% are actually on Medicaid. So, it's a pretty healthy data set of having 2,800 respondents. And obviously not all of them are on Medicare and Medicaid. So just wanted to put that into context as to who the people are that responded to our survey. And, there is a proportion of denials that they identified that were higher in the underrepresented communities, is what, the data analysts found when they were doing this report and helping us provide some more information around what we collected. Next slide, please. So, we shared a little bit about how the results itself. We shared a little bit about the voices from these communities, but what we didn't share a little bit, now I want to share with you a little bit of resources, because while it's good to know all of this information and perhaps we can come up with new concepts, there's probably some existing concepts out there that is important already. So here we put in actually the report itself some already existing resources. So for example, the first one here where it says NORD Rare Care, NORD's State Resource Center includes a directory of programs offering mental health assistance state by state. As you can see from the earlier slides, there was a lot of mental health, a lot of concerns that does impact your stress levels, your resistance, those kinds of things. So we wanted to be sure that folks knew that there is NORD already has a rare care program out there. The next one I wanted to show you is the Patient Advocate Foundation. They have a rare disease care line. Again, if your autoimmune area, your disease also falls under the rare disease category, you might be interested in this rare disease care line. And as I mentioned, RDDC is a coalition member organization, and it's free for any patient advocacy organization to join, for example. And so the Patient Advocate Foundation is actually a member of RDDC. When they first started, they didn't have a rare disease care line. They had a general patient care line, essentially. But what they found out is that there is a difference in the rare disease patient from other patients. And so they set up a rare disease care line a couple of years ago, but they started it after they joined our coalition. So if you join our coalition, hopefully you do find some things that will help your mission, your work in a different way than you've been thinking, because that's exactly what happened with PAF. So this group now has an active rare disease care line, so much so that when they do their annual report, they actually share some metrics and data about who's calling these lines, how many people are calling these lines, and that kind of stuff. So you can go to their website and get more information from their page. Also, if you didn't know, that Social Security also has disability. Well, put it this way: as of uh, earlier this year, I don't know what's going on right now, but as of earlier this year, the Social Security, they have disability benefits for rare disease patients as well. So we have some of that information on our website if you're interested in learning more. And then there's also other programs out there in the caregiver space, such as Rare Givers, who was formerly known as Angel Aid, and they offer community groups and supportive tools for rare disease caregivers globally. So if you work with caregivers, if you identify as a caregiver, and if you're interested in learning more, please go to the Rare Givers website. You can go to the next slide. So some of the solutions out there, is, what we're thinking and helping out and trying to help in this space. Again, we're here to be solution oriented. It's good to have this information, but also it's also good to know is what can we do to help with this information. So solutions are, advocacy work. RDDC does have a policy working group as well. And so we're out there talking more about obviously orphan drugs, getting some of these genetic testing covered and special medications within these Medicaid and private insurance. So, there's some of the things that we do in the policy arm, for example, to help with some of this work. Obviously, when there's comments that can be made or there's some sign-on letters and things along those lines, we're also helping in this space. We want to obviously improve in the provider training in the cultural competency space, ensuring all folks understand more about the rare disease and the education. So this is a great opportunity for me to share a little bit about RDDC, because we have a fellowship program, for example, where we provide training to the fellow around cultural competency. We actually have an 8-hour module essentially on different things within the rare disease space. Moya Moya, for example, is actually one of the educational programs that we train on in our fellowship program. And we also have a CME program that we've partnered with another organization on. So doctors can also get their CME credit and continue to get more information on cultural competency and rare diseases. So RDDC is working hard to fill some of the gaps in, because when doctors are going through their trainings, in many cases, rare disease is actually a elective and not mandatory in their training programs. And then when I've talked to doctors about some of their trainings, the symptoms of a particular rare disease might be extremely extreme. It might be the extremes symptoms, as opposed to some of the other symptoms that rare disease patients actually see and they've been able to be diagnosed with. So there's a whole myriad of reasons why this is super important, that patient advocacy organizations can help fill the gap in the provider training. And even the definition of provider, it's not just your general practitioner, your specialist as a provider, but we broaden that definition up to like occupational therapists, pharmaceutical folks, because we know that in the rare disease space, their whole community is more than just their primary doctor or their specialist doctor or their nurse practitioner. Some rare disease patients often will see like their occupational therapist or physical therapist more often than they actually see their doctors. So those physical therapists also needs to help them and understand the rare disease as well. The third point on here is strengthen patient assistance programs. So as I mentioned earlier, PAF has been great with some of this space. And we have quite a few different financial assistant organizations that are part of our coalition. So if this is something of interest to you all, NORD obviously has it as well. This is something that we are recommending to continue with some of the access solutions. And this is a no-brainer, increase diversity in clinical trials, of course. And so what we mean by that is, right, broadening the opportunities to bring all race into the clinical trials, and partner with the sponsors, the CROs, and others so that they can improve the equity in treatment outcomes. And from the RDDC perspective, there's a couple things that fall into this category. One is the number one reason there's so many data sets out there that we didn't do, but many of our members did, that folks from the underrepresented populations don't participate in clinical trials. It's because they are not asked. And so we've got to do better in getting that information out there. The providers are not asked, sharing this information with them, and others are not. So we need to be sure that the information is getting out there. It's not the trust issue. It's not that some other things that are the myths maybe that are happening in their community. It's because they're not being asked. And then even if they're being asked, recruitment is not the issue either. It's retention, staying in within those trials as well. So then you've got to ask yourself, why are folks leaving? And part of it is because they're not being respected while they're in their trial. Perhaps they're being dismissed, they're not being heard, they're being gaslight, et cetera, for a number of reasons too. So hopefully we can partner together to help in the clinical trial space, the clinical research space, all of those different categories, and natural studies, et cetera, so that we can help the pharmaceutical biotech companies ensure that their drug will work for all people. Next slide, please. Okay, that looks like that's the end of the presentation. So hopefully you all learned a little bit. Again, this is just a teaser, a little bit of what we do as the coalition. I'm super grateful that the Autoimmune Registry asked me to be a part of today's session. And I'm just going to turn it over to, is it Aaron maybe? Or Aaron, you want to grab the mic?
Yeah, I'll say a few words while people, if you have questions, we'll start questions as soon as I've finished talking a little bit about autoimmune disease. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things about autoimmune disease is that it's a lot of them, lupus, MS, scleroderma, they've traditionally been thought of as white person's diseases. And this has been a problem that it goes beyond some of the issues you've been raising and represents a fundamental problem with the way doctors look at patients. They see a white patient and they think of the autoimmune diseases. They see a Black patient and they don't. And that's a real problem in terms of getting care. And now that's changing. But people have to be aware of that. And we're finding more and more that the diseases, Sjogren's disease is another one. I've got a list of 8 diseases, including type 1 diabetes, Sjogren's, celiac, inflammatory bowel diseases, which include Crohn's and ulcerative colitis, myasthenia gravis. Because it takes a long time to diagnose these diseases, it's a lot of effort. And between the doctors maybe not putting in as much effort as they need to, and the patients not being able to get to the appointments. Because one of the things we do know about autoimmune diseases is that they are marked by flares and recessions. And the patient may schedule a visit with the doctor when they're feeling terrible. And then 2 weeks later, when the appointment comes up, they're feeling better. The disease has gone into some kind of remission, at least for a short time, and they miss the appointment because they've got other things to do. They've got kids to take care of, jobs to go to, things like that. So those are things that diminish the number of people in the underserved communities who are getting diagnosed with these diseases. And then doctors say, well, these diseases aren't as common in these populations, but that's really not the way it is. So we have just published, as most of you probably know, we just published our paper on autoimmune disease prevalence that shows the prevalence of all autoimmune diseases within the United States is about 15.5 million people have at least one autoimmune disease. One of the things we discovered is that 35% or more of those individuals have more than one disease. So previous studies that took the number of people with lupus, the number of people with MS, and simply added those numbers together were kind of overcounting because they were double counting the people with more than one disease. So that work we are about to, the initial work was performed 3 years ago. It was just published this past Monday in the Journal of Clinical Investigation. And we're going to be delving in deeper with our research partners. We're going to be looking at socioeconomic factors. Race is another, and ethnic background is a factor that a lot of people are interested in studying, especially the people at our research sites. So those are some of the things that we've been doing. And I'll open it up to questions from the audience.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Erin, for talking through that. Sorry, there's a couple of slides that you can just run through if you want real quick.
Yeah,
Some folks,
why don't you do that?
yeah, and some folks are asking, how do you stay in touch? What's next and everything else. So if anyone's in Washington, D.C., for example, next week, we're all about providing resource and science, and as Erin mentioned, publishing things, but we're also about recognizing the work that's been happening in this community. And as I mentioned, Rare Disease Day is happening next week. So if you're in DC, we still have spaces open for this program. So please join us, go to our website and sign up for this event. As you can see here, this is the second year that we're doing the RISE Awards. And if anybody is in the DC area, Adriana Hopkins might sound familiar to you because she's a news anchor in that area. So she will be hosting it. My boss, Linda Goler-Blunt, will be there along with myself, and then you can see the RISE Award recipients, which may look familiar. Unfortunately, the government will not be attending in person, but I will honor them at the stage with this event. So that's that slide. If you want to go to the next one, again, in Washington, D.C., RDDC is teamed up with the National Minority Quality Forum. You may know this organization. They've been around for a really long time, and they do a leadership conference every year. We are going to do a one-day track on rare diseases on the 29th in particular. So more information is available on our website. And if you are interested in joining us there, we'd love to have you. I don't think that's a free event, but I know the RISE Award is a free event. And then the last slide to some questions that we're getting in is, how do you follow us? How do you stay in touch? There's our website. We have a bi-weekly newsletter. So again, if you want to get in touch with us, feel free to go to our website. And if you want to also partner, we have a form on there that you can partner with us from our website. And then we can figure out how to work through some of these things that are coming through, like genetic testings and other things that maybe we can ideate and come up with some more solutions. So just wanted to share a few of those slides and how to stay in touch.
Well, I have a question for you. My name is Christy Jagfeld, and I'm part of an organization called the Brain Inflammation Collaborative. And we do research on mostly autoimmune type of illnesses, and some are rare, like pandas and PANS and ankylosing spondylitis, autoimmune encephalitis, things like that. And we have a patient diversity specialist. She's actually on this call too, and we're working to make sure that we're reaching people in rural areas and kind of coming up with policy around that. So I think that some kind of a partnership with you guys could be beneficial, and we'll definitely fill out the form. But one of the challenges is reaching these diverse populations and letting know that we have these studies available, and getting assistance around that, and making sure that we're actually reaching them. Is that something that you guys kind of work on as well, or help with, or connect us with different organizations that are interested in that?
Yeah, absolutely. Great point and great question. And as I mentioned in that survey, we were able to have some folks in the rural populations, for example, take the survey, and that's because of the breadth of the coalition. So we have almost 100 members now as part of our coalition, and they range from everywhere from folks that are really tapped into like church communities, for example, to general rare disease groups, as I mentioned, like besides the NORDs and the Patient Advocacy Foundation, but others that are similar to that fashion. And then those are disease specific as well. So because of all those different connecting points, that's how we were able to work a little bit more in the rural areas. And actually, we actually have a real big focus this year in policy around the rural population. We are partnering up with Marilyn Strickland, who's one of our congresswomen, because she wants to do more work with this this act called HEARD, HEARD. And so we're in the process now of socializing and working with her on this new act. And part of that is the rural population and Indigenous people as well as a part of that category. So yeah, happy to partner, Christy.
Yeah, I would love to have a separate call with you sometime and just kind of talk a little bit more about both of our organizations. But thank you for the work that you do. This is, such a needed area. And I think that across the chronic illness and rare disease, that frustration is just something that doesn't seem to get any better over time. You talk to so many patients, just repeatedly the same stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you see that there is a commonality between things that we have scientifically created as categories, but yet there's so many similarities across these different categories, and meaning like autoimmune versus chronic disease versus rare disease, right? But when it comes down to it, that person that's living with this, they don't care what it's called. They just know.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of them that are considered rare are probably more likely rarely diagnosed, and some of them probably fall into a lot less rare. So,
right. Thanks for asking the question.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I have a
Any-
follow-up question
Go ahead,
to
Rebecca.
to Christie's. And I'm part of the Brain Inflammation Collaborative too, but one of the things that we're working on is just the language around, how do you have these conversations with patients? And then also like if someone's recruiting, so like a clinical researcher is recruiting to do their research, like how do they make sure that people understand like it's diverse, like everyone should be included, right? And like really the stance that both the researcher and the organization are taking on those. Have you done any work on just kind of that language piece? Because I pulled a couple different groups on like what would deter them from engaging, and I mean it's it's a pretty wide variety, but it seems like somewhere there should probably exist some type of guideline on like, okay, if you're trying to recruit or you're having these conversations, these are like the basic things that you should take into consideration. The level of language used, like really like as least amount of medical jargon as possible. Like those are some of the things that came up. But do you guys plan to do anything with this research kind of on next steps? Because it's like, it seems like that's the direction that people need to be thinking about too, is like the language that they're using when they're having these conversations.
Yeah, so great point, Rebecca. So I mentioned that this survey was done by one working group, which is the patient provider caregiver journey working group, with the underlying theme of delays in diagnosis and that concept. The other working group I mentioned a second ago was the policy working group that's a part of the RDDC. And actually the third working group we have, as you can imagine, is diversity in research and clinical trials. And that working group, when we first started, partnered with Children's Hospital, and Children's Hospital at that point had an app called Bear Clips, and then we've changed it to Gene Clips through, again, this relationship that we are influencing in this space. And in the original videos that they had under Bear Clips, I guess, they had information just in general around clinical trials, IRB, research, those kinds of general information that would be important to what you're saying, Rebecca. And then we took a hold of it and actually broadened it a little bit, or made it more for all people, where we have different type of representations, and we have it in English and Spanish, and it's on our website as well as on our YouTube page. And so you can find this information that's in a language that's meant for all folks to be able to understand what is a clinical trial, what is the IRB. And so it's designed from a health literacy perspective, so that you don't have to be a doctor to understand what the heck is happening here. So we have that we've already done, and it's public information that you're more than welcome to take a look at and use. And then actually the working group, the research and clinical trial working group, that's their project this year, is to provide a series of guidelines, best practices, those kinds of things in the clinical trials space. So I'd love for you all to participate, be a member, and collaborate with us. And it sounds like, Rebecca, we could use your influence in that working group.
Yeah, I think I'll yield to Christy, but I think we would be happy to participate because we're trying to kind of solve for the same thing. So it'd be great to join forces.
Yeah,
Perfect.
for sure. And seeing your health literacy piece would be useful too, as we're redoing our website and trying to make sure that we're speaking in a way that makes sense to a wide range of people. So.
Absolutely.
Other questions? I have a comment. Something I've been thinking about lately. I've been as we know, we don't get into political things. It's nonprofits in the U.S. are prohibited from political involvement, but obviously there's a the government's moving away. The U.S. government's moving away from diversity initiatives. That's a fact. But one of the things that we've noticed, at least in our work with clinical trial sponsors, they have a much longer view of the world than people in politics. They don't have a 2-year or 4-year time frame. They have a 20 or 30-year time frame that they're thinking about. And we haven't seen any changes in their commitment to diversity. So I think in the clinical trial space, we'll continue to see this as an important issue that the pharma companies want to address because it's the right thing to do, of course, and not because it's a political thing. So I just want to point that out. One group that's done a remarkable job in terms of diversity that I am always pointing out because I work with them closely is the All of Us program, run by the NIH. They are having some funding challenges, of course, but they've done a remarkable job of getting a highly diverse group of people into the database that can be used by any nonprofit or researcher in the US. And it's going to be opened up to commercial researchers as well at some point in the near future. And of course, you can always either go onto the website for the All of Us program, or you can contact us for more details if you're interested in using that platform. But any other questions or thoughts?
Yeah, it's a great point, Aaron. The Black Women's Health Imperative, through some of our other programs, actually partnered and helped the NIH through some of the All of Us program as well. So as a conduit, right, an organization like Black Women, it's super important to partner with because of the nature of the All of Us program. So yeah, so I'm glad you called that one out. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Aaron. And I work in, like, my full-time job is in the insurance world, and hopefully, I mean, one of the things that we're required to do and is only, getting more stringent like year after year is as part of our NCQA, the actual REL data collection. So for years and years, people have essentially bought imputed data, like, you're kind of guessing. So like this percentage of our population is this percentage is this, but they're now making it a requirement for us. And, I'm hoping that this still exists in certain pockets because I know it has been such a hot topic, but this last year we had to collect 20%. So we had to work really closely with our employer groups and then, what can they put in place to get accurate demographic information so then we can use it to better serve members. And I think over the next few years, it's going to go up to like 90% of that REL data collection. But it is such a critical element of being able to do any type of work. Like you just cannot understand your population unless you understand the demographics. But it's a hard thing right now.
Yep.
Yeah, I just
One of our
want to jump
challenges.
in. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, please,
No, I just
Tyler.
want to jump in and thank Jenifer, particularly for making those distinctions between resourced and under-resourced communities. I think that's where more understanding has to happen. And so I look for, I'll go read your whole report, but I think that's really going to be valuable information going forward. So I just want to say thanks and grateful to be able to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you all for participating in your engagement during this time. Appreciate it. You all have choices for this hour and you chose to spend the time with me on this session. I appreciate it. And I will say that based on what Aaron also talked a little bit about the word diversity, you know, that is a scary word now for today's administration. And so we're really trying to be sure that when we talk about diversity, that we're honing in specifically of what we mean by that. And it's going to take a minute, I think. We'll all step in it, as they say, along the way. Next week I go to the Hill, and right now I'm meeting with a bunch of Democrats, but I've asked to also meet with Republicans, because to Aaron's point, we are bicameral and bipartisan in the way that we approach our conversations with the folks on the Hill. And I know that when I'm speaking with some Republicans, and they're mostly meet with their staffers than the actual elected official, but I still want to make sure that I'm saying it in a way that's not going to turn them off. And so things like, you know, inclusive health outcomes is the language that I'm starting to use, trying not to call out certain populations like BIPOC. It doesn't really, it can turn certain groups off by saying it like that. And so to your point, Tyler, I want to be able to make sure that I'm articulating in a way that's going to resonate with the audience. So thank you. If there's no other questions, I'm going to turn it over back to Reggie to close us out.
Yep. Well, I just want to thank you before Reggie. I want to thank you for a great presentation. I'm very interested in seeing more of that data. That survey is amazing. And we should be highlighting some of that in some of our newsletters, I think. But I think your work is even more important now than it was 3 months ago. So please, thank you very much for that work. And Reggie?
Thank you very much, Jenifer. A wonderful presentation. And thanks, Aaron, for insightful feedback always. Just want to wrap up our February webinar with that. Thank you. And also to highlight for the month of March, we're going to have the Executive Director of the Global Lyme Alliance, Carrie DeAngelis, who will be our featured speaker for the month of March on April 20th. So please mark your calendar, and we'll be looking for everyone to join. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Reggie. Thanks, Jenifer.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so
Bye-bye.
much.